We have a lot of developments to look out for this week on the January 6th front. The House Select Committee says it's expecting to get a hold of deleted Secret Service texts by Tuesday. This after the Department of Homeland Security's internal watchdog said last week that the Secret Service erased text messages from January 5th and January 6, 2021. The next day, in a swift move, the House January 6th committee subpoenaed the Secret Service regarding those missing texts. According to the D.C.-based ethics watch group CREW, the Secret Service may have violated federal criminal law if they did, in fact, destroy any text messages. They filed a complaint with the DOJ on Monday. Republican Congressman and January 6th committee member Adam Kinzinger spoke to Face the Nation on CBS about those messages.
They claim it was this technological change. We moved everything. We lost these texts. And then they also put out a statement, though, that said, we've only lost some of the text and everything relevant to this investigation has been turned over. So those are very conflicting statements. In the very least, it is quite crazy that the Secret Service would actually end up deleting anything related to one of the more infamous days in American history, particularly when it comes to the role of the Secret Service.
If the texts do reach the committee on Tuesday, it'll be just in time before Thursday's primetime hearing. It's the last one slated in this batch of 8 public hearings, and it'll be centered around 187 minutes on January 6th. That's the time it took former President Donald Trump to tell his supporters to leave the Capitol after the attack began. Democratic Congresswoman Elaine Luria, who's set to lead Thursday's hearing with Kinzinger, spoke on CNN's State of the Union about how Trump failed to act in that crucial window.
Mr. Kinzinger and I were both veterans leading this committee. I think, as veterans of the military understand, what action looks like in a time of crisis. And also the president. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the only person in the Constitution whose duty is explicitly laid out to ensure that the laws are faithfully executed. I look at it as a dereliction of duty. He didn't act. He had a duty to act. So we will address that in a lot of detail, and from that we will build on the information that we provided in the earlier hearings.
Also kicking off this week is the trial of former White House strategist Stephen Bannon, who was charged with contempt of Congress last year for refusing to speak with the committee. Jury selection is underway after a judge rejected Bannon's attempts at delaying the trial further. It was in last week's January 6 hearings that we learned Trump spoke to Bannon twice on January 5th. The same day, Bannon told his massive podcast audience, quote, all hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman from Arizona, Ruben Gallego, who also chairs the Bold PAC, which is aimed at increasing the diversity of House and Senate leadership. Congressman Gallego, thanks for joining me. Now, the Secret Service, it's denied that it maliciously deleted those text messages, saying that some phone data was lost during a, quote, a pre-planned 3-month system migration. But how concerning is it to you that such important and valuable information can just suddenly go missing like that?
Well, number one, I don't think in this world that we live in, there is such thing as missing data. So the Secret Service should be very forthcoming with how we can go and find that data. I also think they need to be very, very clear and transparent with us, like where their involvement was on January 6th. They're here to protect the United States, the president being an extension of that. They're not here to aid the president. And I think there was some Secret Service members that were compromised. And I think there's a lot of questions that we really need to bring up, and they need to answer because, look, the Secret Service is in charge of guarding the president, but it's not their only job. And if they're not going to be very honest with us, then I think we should probably start looking at another law enforcement agency and move them out of the way. Because if they're not going to be here to protect the Constitution of the United States, and they're going to be easily compromised by presidents, whether it's this one or other ones, then maybe they should not be guarding the president anymore.
Well, and, we still don't know who Thursday's witnesses are going to be at this next hearing. But I want you to have a listen to what Congresswoman Elaine Luria, your colleague, told CNN on Sunday about this week's witnesses.
There's other witnesses we've spoken to who have yet to appear in our previous hearings who will add a lot of value and information to the events of that critical time on January 6th. There will definitely be people included in the hearing who we have not heard from so far.
So, I mean, these hearings, they have different purposes, but Do you think that they're putting pressure on people who were either involved with the Trump administration or with the Capitol riot that day to step up and to actually speak out?
I think they are. I think that, we have some very brave people, such as the young woman that testified a couple of weeks ago and basically put her career on the line. And then you have some, old seasoned pros that were basically hiding. But, at this point, what we're trying to figure out is who did not do the right things. And by basically allowing the president to continue down this crazy path, allowing other people to feed this lie and not standing up and saying, like, hey, I'm resigning if you do this, they put this country in some very, very serious trouble. Imagine the Republican Party had been like the Conservative Party of England, of Great Britain, who stood up against Boris Johnson and told him, it's time for you to go. And he had these forced resignations. I don't think you'd see January 6th. Instead, you saw some very cowardly men and women that were more worried about their careers and living off the Trump train than they were for protecting the Constitution of the United States.
Well, and speaking of yes men, we also have Steve Bannon's criminal contempt trial that's starting this week over his refusal to cooperate with the January 6th committee. What are you hoping comes out of this trial?
I hope he goes to jail.
Well, that's certainly straightforward and simple and to the point. But look, Bannon is considered an architect of the efforts to overturn the election. And we know that he undermines our democracy in his podcast, which has a huge national audience, I think over 200 million downloads. When we deal with this bigger issue, like, how do you counter the reach of that?
Well, you counter the reach of that by showing what a pathetic human being he is. He shows that he tries to show that he's this tough guy. But, as soon as he spends at least, hopefully 2 years in jail, you'll see him crying. And then this kind of alpha male personality that he tries to put out there, which he is not, I think will crumble. So that's why I'm saying the best thing that we could do is for Bannon to go to jail for as long as possible and publicly humiliate himself when he starts crying and whining about it.
I want to switch topics for a second and talk to you about your home state of Arizona. Of course, Arizona is considered now a battleground state. It's also a state with a very heated Republican primary for governor. Former Vice President Mike Pence is endorsing developer Karen Taylor Robson for governor, and Donald Trump is endorsing an opponent, former TV anchor and election denier Kari Lake. They're going to be holding dueling rallies for their respective candidates on Friday. So what direction do you see the Republican Party there in your home state of Arizona taking?
Look, the Republican Party has moved so far to the right that we don't even know what it is. Let's not try to make the developer seem like she's some type of moderate alternative. She's just a conservative that is not being supported by Donald Trump. She never denied that there was an election stolen. She didn't push it, but she also hasn't denied it. And she's taken some very, very conservative stances, such as being anti-choice, something that's extremely important in Arizona, has not been helping the environment, all these things. So there's not as much as a fight. It's basically a personality fight. Are you on the pro-Trump ticket or you're not a pro-Trump ticket? And at the end of the day, if either of them wins the general, Arizona, especially working class people in Arizona, are going to lose.
Before I let you go, I want to talk for a second about President Biden's agenda. Once again, we're seeing Senator Joe Manchin shoot down a reconciliation bill that tackles climate change. Now, this was supposed to be a central part of the Democratic agenda before the midterms, and it looks like it's failed. Senate Democrats have not been hiding their frustrations. I'm sure that you feel it there on Capitol Hill. Do you share those frustrations?
Certainly. Look, we have we hit the trifecta. We have the House, we have the White House, and we have the Senate. And yet we can't move an agenda because we have one senator who, I think is really basing a lot of his decisions on some really bad information. I hope that we can at least make some movement on prescription drugs, on insulin, capping the price of insulin, anything. But I think Manchin is more interested in stymieing the president and the Democratic agenda than he is than really governing. And I think that's a problem. But also, this is a bigger problem in general with the Senate. It is more bound by old ancient rules that only encourages people to slow down almost everything possible and doesn't encourage any type of bipartisanship. And the best way to start by fixing this by getting rid of the filibuster, and Manchin and Sinema, of course, are the biggest hindrance to that.
Well, Congressman, speaking of the Senate, I know that one of the things that's been in the air is whether you're going to run for Senate in 2024 against one of the other sometimes roadblock to progress, Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Are you going to run for Senate? Have you made up your mind on that?
Well, Julian, right now it's 2022, and this is a 2023 decision. So we'll be making those decisions in 2023. This year, I want to make sure that we hold the Senate, and that way we have an opportunity in the future to get more senators in to, get rid of the filibuster and actually pass real legislation that helps working class Americans.